Where's Jane?
Okay, well, it's a few minutes past 6, and it looks like we do have some participants, and we'll admit the latecomers as they arrive. We're currently live streaming on YouTube, and it's time for me to do my housekeeping chores as usual. I'm making a shameless plug for joining us at Fufu Fest this Saturday from 9 to 3. If you go on the website, you'll be able to get some details. Just click on the picture of these two cats and it will take you to a page that gives you a map and other details. So just a reminder, civil discourse disclaimer, let's keep it civil. If anybody gets a little too far out of line, we reserve the right to remove them from the meeting. And of course, we want to make clear that opinions expressed by the audience are not necessarily ours. We are a nonpartisan organization. So our topic tonight is redistricting in Florida, and our featured speaker is David Stafford, Supervisor of Elections, Escambia County, well known to this group. Just remind you, audience, to please mute your microphone to reduce background noise. And if you're not sure how to mute your microphone, I'll take over and mute it for you in a few minutes. Don't forget to enter your questions in chat. If you're watching in Zoom or YouTube, there's a chat for both programs. So post your question there, and we'll be sure to make sure that we ask it of Mr. Stafford toward the end of the meeting. And as always, we are recording, and the video recordings will be posted latest tomorrow in Facebook and on YouTube. And of course, you can find the buttons to either of those wonderful programs on our website at lwvpba.org. Just look in the upper right corner of any page and you'll see it there. So I'll stop sharing and let me change the view to speaker view. And Paula, are you going to introduce, or is Jane going to introduce?
Ask Jane. She's here.
She's here.
Yeah.
Jane, are you introducing?
Okay, she's not. It's me.
Oh, you do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We are delighted to have David Stafford here with us tonight. He has served as the Escambia County Supervisor of Elections since January of 2005, following his election the previous November. He's a graduate of the University of Florida. He's the past president of the Florida Supervisors of Elections and the current legislative co-chair of the National Association of Elected Officials. I have here a whole list of other things that David has been participating in, including Government Coordinating Council, as one of 9 local election officials nationally. He serves on the executive committee and helped to author the communication and information sharing protocols for the sector. His office was the recipient of the 2020 U.S. Election Assistant Commission Clearinghouse Award, known as the CLEARY, for the best practices in election administration. He's an active community member. He's a native of Pensacola, where he resides with his wife and their 2 sons. He has been very closely connected to the process of redistricting, and we have asked him here tonight to tell us about it. David?
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm joining you from my home. If I sound a little different, I've got a little head cold, and I did, just so everybody knows, even though we're remote, I did, out of an abundance of caution, even though I'm fully vaccinated, I did get a PCR test today, and it was negative. But anyway, so if I sound a little stuffy, that's the reason why. I'm on medication, but I'm okay. But it's a great to be with you all, and I'm going to share a little presentation. Actually, a longer form of this presentation is what I actually, I was asked to participate in a in a continuing education class with my colleagues in the Florida Association on a panel that we did on redistricting. So this is more of a condensed version, more locally focused rather than state focused. But I'm going to kind of go through it pretty quickly and drill down on a couple of things that I think you all might be interested in. And as always, I'm happy to take questions at the end. I do want to start with my normal disclaimer that I'm not an attorney. So all the legal interpretations you're going to get and $5 will get you a cup of Starbucks. So I always have to just share that disclaimer, but I have studied this for a while. And so I think I've got a pretty decent handle on it. And in particular, what we're dealing with here at the local level, which I'm sure you guys are interested in. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen so we can begin the presentation. And it looks like I've got it there. And I'm just going to try to do the slideshow from beginning. All right. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Well, here I go. So first of all, I think terminology is important because a lot of times these terms are intertwined and they're three distinctly different things. The first is reapportionment, and that is dividing the congressional seats, the 435 congressional seats, which incidentally, it's been that way since I think 1959 for earlier part of the history of our country. The number of seats in Congress actually grew fairly often, but it's been at 435 since I think 1959, and that's when Alaska and Hawaii were entered the Union. So reapportionment is when they divide those 435 seats among the 50 states following the data that comes from the census. So basically, they take the total population and do some analysis, and then allocate seats to each state. Redistricting, and that happened back in April. Redistricting is the process at the state level. It happens at the state and local level. So at the state in Florida, the state will draw the congressional lines, the state Senate lines, and the state House of Representative lines. Locally, we will do that. Particularly, it's important in Escambia County because we have so many single member districts. That's where the district lines within the county. So that would be the school board, the board of county commissioners, and also in the city of Pensacola. And then the last part of that process, which will be totally us in our office, is we will have to redraw some precinct lines to take into consideration where those district lines have changed. And so those are the three different, and they kind of go in that order. The first thing that happens is reapportionment. Next thing that happens is redistricting. And the final step in that process is reprecincting. So this is your typical, and I stress the typical congressional redistricting timeline. This is not a typical year. So normally, as you can see here on this calendar, the census happens in the even numbered year. So that would have been 2020. Then the apportionment happens in the next odd numbered year, the first year of the new decade. And that occurred in April, was when the redistricting numbers were released. As you may know, and I think I'll get to that next. Yeah. And then finally, the process then additional data gets released, and then the states and the localities will do their redistricting. And then the year 2022 will be the election at which the new district lines and the new apportioned Congress will stand for election. And then they, of course, take office at the congressional level in early 2003. So again, the reapportionment was released in April, and Florida gained 1 seat, which is good that we didn't lose a seat or didn't stay static. There was a lot of speculation leading up to the census so at one point they were talking about us gaining 3 seats, and then it seemed to settle on Florida looked like they were going to get 2 seats. But ultimately, we only gained a single seat. The only state that gained more than 1 seat was the state of Texas. And so, as you can see, that's in the dark green there. The other green states were states that gained, and then the purple states were the ones that lost a seat, because it's a zero-sum game. So if Florida gains a seat, sorry about that. If Florida gains a seat, that means another state has to lose a seat. Henry, stop. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so the redistricting data was delayed this year. Normally, we get that data very early in the year, or much earlier in the year. Unfortunately, because of, I think, twofold. One was COVID, and the second was a lot of bureaucratic and legal maneuvering up in Washington, that we did not get that data until August, and then the full redistricting data was released in September. But for the things that we needed to do, we were able to get that data in August. And basically, what that is it goes by census block, and then the census blocks will tell you, number one, population, just how many people, human beings, the census says are in that census block, and then it will give demographic data. And that becomes important, particularly here, and again, it's in Escambia County, when you're looking at trying to draw majority minority districts. So that'll show you total population. It'll show you white population, African American, Hispanic, and then it'll drill down even further and get into things like voting age population, again by demographic. And so we got that data in August. So what did that look like? So the first thing that happens is you look at where you stand currently. So what this data, this is the county level, county and school board district data. Fortunately, our lines, the lines have been aligned for the last 10 years. That was important to me in encouraging both the Board of County Commissioners and the school board 10 years ago to adopt the same lines to minimize voter confusion. And they did do that. And so what you first do is you say, okay, if we made no changes to the district lines, what does that look like? And there's a lot of, I know this is kind of an eye chart here, but I would say the two most important numbers are that top number, which is the population going left to right. You see, District 1, 68, 158. So, well, actually, let me back up a second. So the census told us that that Escambia County now has 321,905 total population. That is people that are residents that live inside of Escambia County. So then what you do to get the ideal population is it's simple math. You divide it by 5 because we have 5 districts. And then what that comes out to is 64,381 is the quote unquote ideal district population. That would mean that if every district had that number, they would be completely equal in population. So again, you're looking at what do you do? You figure out where your starting point is. And so District 1, I think, those of you who are familiar with the districts here in Escambia County and the growth patterns are not surprised because that includes the Beulah area. And so that experienced a tremendous amount of growth, close to 6% above the ideal population. So that means District 1 would have to lose population. District 2 was underpopulated by just over 5%. District 3, 4.75. District 4 was, I think, the closest. And let me move my thing here. And then you have District 5, which was up about a little over 3%. So that's our starting point. Going on to the city of Pensacola. Again, the city has single member districts and they have a redistricting process, that we'll talk about here in a second. And you'll see that those range, I won't go one by one, from a high of about 5.5% in District 6 overpopulated, And then District 5 was underpopulated by just over 5%. So again, that's your starting point. So if you did nothing, this is what the districts would look like for the next 10 years. This is what the basically the population would be. And then we have some data that just takes a snapshot of Florida, sort of the macro Florida. So you see that we grew little over almost little over 2.7 million. We gained in population. We picked up 1 seat. The ideal congressional district population increased by just under 73,000. The House, state House was just under 23,000, up over 2010. And then Senate population per district was up almost a little over 68,000. So we obviously experienced some growth. And then again, so you're taking a snapshot of the our state level seats. So we, as you all know, in Escambia County, we have 2 House seats and we have 1 Senate seat and 1 congressional seat. So House District 1, which is the northernmost House district, that's Michelle Salzman's district right now, that was underpopulated by 5,700 plus or minus. Well, it's plus. It's a little over 5,700, which amounts to about 3.2% low. House District 2, which is Alex Andrade's, was 15,000 shy, which is 8.5% low. Senate was pretty much dead on. Was only 621. So there's not a whole lot of change that actually had to occur in Senate. And then the congressional district was overpopulated. I think most of that had to do with growth east of us. And that's about 5% high over the population. So in essence, 2 of our districts have to grow in size, and 1 of them has to actually shed some population. And actually today, the State Senate Redistricting Committee released their first set of maps, and they did 4 versions of the state Senate map and 4 versions of the congressional map. And they generally aligned. Our county is the same because we're just, I mean, we're totally encompassed in all those 3, and it's just a matter of where the eastern boundary of those are. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already been to the Florida Redistricting website, it's got a wealth of information. You can actually draw your own districts. It's pretty neat if you want to kind of spend some time noodling around there. So again, that's the starting point for all this. All right. So what are the standards and considerations for districts? So first, you've got some. So we'll start at the 30,000 foot level, and you got the general federal guidelines. First of all, you got population equality, and that's the 1 person, 1 vote. And that's the reason why you want to adjust these lines, because if you have a district that's underpopulated and a district that's overpopulated, the underpopulated district is getting arguably more representation per individual than the district that's overpopulated. So that's my understanding. That's the idea behind the census, is you adjust the districts to adjust for population growth after the decennial census, and that's part of the Article 1, Section 2, and then the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Then you have racial and language minority protections. Those are the Section 2 and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5, as you all know or may know, is the one that's been getting that's gotten a lot of attention over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, since actually 8 years now, since the Shelby County decision. And that's the whole pre-clearance. But the Voting Rights Act still does exist, and there are still provisions that protect individuals from being discriminated against in the redistricting process. And then there's others, your sort of general evergreen, you want compactness, contiguity, You want to respect political subdivisions where you can. You want to respect communities of interest, political competition, and then you can also use existing districts and incumbents as criteria. And there's a whole lot more. That's just kind of the highlights. And incidentally, if you go back and look at the Voting Rights Act, that's the reason, I know you all know this, but I think it's important to reiterate, the reason that Escambia County and the city of Pensacola have single member districts was because of litigation that was brought in the late 70s, started in the late 70s, and it was concluded in the middle part of the next decade. Under the Voting Rights Act, that said that the at-large system that both the city, the school board, and the county and the county commission had was discriminatory against minorities, because minorities made up a significant part of the population, but they were unable to elect a person of their choosing. And so ultimately the court said, you all have to use single member districts. And that's why we're different than Santa Rosa County, Okaloosa County, and quite frankly, most of the counties in the state elect their members at large. All right, and then we have some state and local requirements. As you all know, because I know you all were very involved in this, the league was very involved in the fair districts movement back, which was passed by the voters, was ratified by the voters in 2010. So they went into effect for the first time in the 2010 redistricting process. And then those are enshrined in the Florida Constitution. Then you have some statutory provisions, some that say, first of all, that there's a requirement that the county commission redistrict after the decennial census. There's other requirements that say that you cannot redistrict in an odd number of years. So that's created a challenge, quite frankly, because of, as I mentioned before, we were delayed in receiving the redistricting data. So that kind of put everybody, forced everybody to have a later start than usual. So that compressed the time frame. There is some ambiguity. There's some counties that actually believe that you can go into the next year, but that's not really settled. Again, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds right now, but from my standpoint, the county and the school board are both moving towards completing their redistricting process this calendar year. And then county, the county charter doesn't apply to us because, as you all know, we're a non-charter county, but some counties do have their own charter and have their own provisions for redistricting and set up redistricting commissions, et cetera. And then city charters, in particular, obviously the city of Pensacola has their own charter and has their own redistricting commission. So charter counties can have and municipalities can have requirements above and beyond what the state requires. And to be clear, the state provision, because I think there was some confusion, there's been some confusion over the years, the state provisions that are enshrined in the Constitution, the fair districts, those apply only to congressional and legislative state lines. They do not drill down to the local level. So you have the City Redistricting Commission, 7 members appointed by members of the council. So what are the standards? So they basically set up, and this was part of the city charter when they changed their form of government. First of all, equal population, and they say you can have a 5% maximum deviation above or below that mean, that ideal district size. It has to be contiguous territory. The boundaries have to be as short as possible. Consideration must be given to other districts and precincts, and that's sort of the interaction between county lines, state lines, et cetera. Equal, and then just a general equal and effective representation per U.S. Constitution and the law. So those are the standards that were set forth. And then, of course, what's not mentioned in there, but is a necessary part of it, again, talking about what I referred to earlier, is the whole issue of majority minority districts, minority representation. And there's there's kind of a common misconception, I think, that's out there, that we're still under some binding court order at the city and the county and the school board. That's not really the case, because that case sort of ended when they changed the form of government. But in essence, let's say that the county all of a sudden decided they wanted to go back to single member districts, or they wanted to not draw a majority minority district, then I'm 100% positive that they would find themselves back in court being sued under the Voting Rights Act. So it's a requirement, but it's not because of, it's not still binding. That case is not still binding on everyone. And so in the city redistricting, the timeline, they have to submit it to council 1 year before the general election. And then that becomes effective if not rejected by the council in 3 weeks. And then if it is rejected by the council, then there's a whole other set of processes that basically say, okay, you need to go fix this. And then it comes back to the council, et cetera. The city has pretty much, they're pretty far along. The redistricting commission has basically completed their work. They settled on unanimously on a plan that they've I believe are in the process of publishing, that will then go to the city council, and that process continues. But there seemed to be pretty widespread certainly among the commission acceptance of agreement on the map. So we haven't seen too many red flags on that to date. All right, school board and the county and ECUA. I include ECUA there. They don't really have a say in it because by statute, they have to follow the county lines. So basically, whatever the county decides applies to ECUA. So they don't really have a say in it, a formal say. I think they can probably make their views known to the county, but they have to follow the county lines. School board, on the other hand, is their own independent. They could have completely different districts. But as I said before, I encourage the county and the school board to, if at all possible, to have the same lines. They did that 10 years ago, and they both those bodies have generally agreed to try to attempt to do that again this year. So who are the decision makers? The county commission and the school board determine their districts, and again, the ECUA follows the commission districts. And as I mentioned before, that it's got to be completed an odd numbered year. And again, I mentioned here just as an aside that there is possible leeway. There was an attorney general opinion back 20 years ago that said, well, there may be some leeway if you in a redistricting year, if there's extenuating circumstances and you bleed over into the new year. But it's, in my, again, non-legal opinion, that it's not overly settled. Although some states, some counties are doing that. And I don't know if you saw the news. It looked like over in Santa Rosa County, they're just not going to redistrict this year. They're going to punt until 2023. And some counties have done that in the past. So here's the Florida redistricting timeline. Just kind of give you a snapshot. Again, you've got the redistricting process. The statutory deadline for states to receive the redistricting data was supposed to be in March. Again, that didn't happen until August. The reapportionment did happen in April, and then again, the redistricting data was delivered to us in August, September, and then the redistricting process is beginning. So the committees are at work right now. And as I mentioned, the first set of maps, sort of official maps, came out for consideration. And I suspect you'll see some more activity. But that session begins in 2022 in January, mid-January, and it ends in mid-March. And so the idea is they would have the districts finalized by mid-March. And at that point, once that happens, then we will have to move very quickly So one of the things that's fortunate is we basically will only have one state line running through Escambia County, and that is the state house line, because again, we don't have more than one state Senate district or more than one congressional district here in Escambia County. So we basically only have to worry about one line. And the idea there is if the state line would come in and bisect a weird section and, create some difficulty between two county commission districts, or we just have to make some adjustments there. So that final step of doing the re-precincting would happen after they finalize their maps. And then we would move quickly in making sure that voters are informed of, if their districts and precincts have changed and polling locations and all that. So that's going to be a big chore. It is every 10 years, but it's going to be, another one this year. And then, of course, those seats will be in place. Again, this is assuming that nothing goes awry at the state level with litigation or anything. Those seats will be in play for the 2022 elections. And this is again kind of a little bit of an eye hurt here, but basically green is good. So green is the ideal process where everything goes as it should. Which happened in 1972 and 2002. Basically the process works as it should. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have 2012, where some of the districts got kicked into the courts. And ultimately you had a court ended up drawing, I think it was either the congressional districts or the state Senate districts. So that's what you don't want to have happen, both from I don't think you want courts doing that. Generally, I think you want the political bodies doing that where they can, and also from a timing standpoint, the more litigation you have, the longer that pushes it either into the calendar year or into middle part of the decade, which is what happened with some of the seats here in Florida after the last redistricting. And with that, I know I kind of went over things very quickly, but I figured you all would have some questions about any of those things. That I guess the other thing I would say, just kind of give you an update on the county redistricting. They had a special meeting earlier this week, and they ultimately decided on a plan that was passed 4-1. Pretty significant changes. Particularly in the southwestern part of the county. It takes Perdido Key out of District 2, which it's been in for the last, I think, 20 years, and places it back into, if you listen to the District 1 commissioner, with the way it was prior to that, I guess 30 years ago. That's probably the most significant shift is it takes that sort of the westernmost part of the county, in the southwestern part, and pulls that up into District 1, and then it kind of compresses District 2 a little bit, and District 2 comes in, takes a little bit more of downtown, and then it makes some adjustments to District 3. District 4 and District 5 didn't change a whole lot. That's the northernmost district, the rural district at Stephen Berry, in the northern end. Basically, it's actually pretty easy. You just follows 9 Mile Road. Is the dividing line. And then Robert Bender's District 4 on the eastern part didn't change a ton, but District 3, District 1 and 2 changed the most. District 3 changed a little bit as well. And so their process is then they will go to both the school board and the county commission are moving forward to publicly notice those. And then they'll have meetings in December with the idea of final adoption before the end of the calendar year. That's my understanding of what they're doing. So, questions? Anything I didn't cover?
We do have a few in the chat. Do you want me to read those to you, or would you rather look?
Sure, that's fine if you want to read them to me.
Okay, you answered one about, but I'll read it to so that the audience gets to hear it. Someone asked if you would go over the new rules for mail-in ballot registrations.
Sure. I'll do that. Let me do that real quickly. So there's actually two important changes. Number one is again the time frame. So used to be that one request was good for 2 election cycles. So under the old rules, if you were to call our office today and say, I want to be a vote by mail voter, that request could be good for both 22 and 20 in the 24 election cycle. The legislature changed that. You all know because you guys are suing me and my colleagues because of the law that we opposed. Anyway, that's a story for another day. I get it. I understand. But so now what will happen is after the 22 election, everything resets and everybody will have to reapply for vote by mail ballots. The second important change is you have to include an additional identifier on your vote by mail application. So if you do it online, it's automatic because it's a requirement. But and also if you use our forms that we have, it's on there. But you either need to include your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number in order, and that's something again that the legislature did. An additional identifier. It used to just be your date of birth and your signature and your address, but now you have to have that additional identifier in order for that to be a valid vote by mail request.
Okay, and someone asked about the local maps, if they were drawn yet. So are they?
Yeah, yes, they are. So both the city's map is drawn and the county commission and school board maps are drawn. Now, again, they're not finalized. Those are all still but they're pretty far along in the process. So the Redistricting Commission, again, it pretty much ended their activity, or they will, by passing it off to the city council for their action. So that's pretty, there's certainly things can happen, but I don't see any. I haven't seen any indication that there's going to be any significant changes to that map. And again, I could be wrong. The city council could come back and say we hate it, but they appointed the people. So there's an assumption that they had some discussion with their individual members of the Redistricting Commission. And then the city map, the county map, I saw something where the District 2 commissioner is going out and having some town hall meetings. And so it's possible that between now and when they meet again, I think in early December, for consideration of to finalize the maps, that there could be some changes, but they do have sort of official maps that are being advertised that will be the basis for consideration moving forward.
Okay. And then someone asked, what is in our census block? Okay, so a census block is just basically it's all kinds of information. So, and it's interesting because they vary in size and shape. Some of them look like just a perfect, city block, as you would think. Others are, particularly once you get into the rural areas, are big. Some of them have 0 population. Some of them, have a lot of population. So what you do when you're building a district is the census block is the basic building block. And so if you're trying to get to 64,381, then you have to select enough census blocks to get near that number. So it's basically the building block. And within that you have, the basis of it is population, it's people. So the census, that's just a geographic boundary that says this is the building block of, could be 500 people, it could be 3 people. And then within that, there's also demographic information. It will tell you how many of those people in that are a voting age population, which basically means how many are 18 or over, how many are African-American, how many are Asian, how many of them are multiracial. And so there's a whole wealth of information that's available on those. The ones that they're looked at, for the purposes of redistricting most closely are total population, and then again that voting age African American population when you're trying to draw those majority minority districts. And so the city was able to come up with 2 majority minority districts out of their 7.
And then the county was able to come up with a majority minority district in District 3.
And our education committee, headed by Paula Montgomery, is putting together a manual for local government for 7th grade local government or government classes. And we'd like to include the new maps. When do you think we can expect those, and where would we get them?
So the finalized maps, again, the finalized maps for the county and the school board are scheduled to be completed by the end of the calendar year. The city maps, they extend a little bit into the process extends a little bit into the new year. I think they complete their process in January or February. But I mean, they have versions available now, but if you're waiting for the final, like this is the approved, the ones that are, we'll be electing our next batch of elected officials off of, again, county and school board by the end of the calendar, city probably, first quarter of 2022, and then the sort of the one that's a little less certain, or that would take the longest, would be the legislative districts, and that'd probably be sometime in the late spring, early summer of probably late spring of 2022.
And do you think will they put those entities, put them on their website? Or
absolutely, they're already available now. If you go to the various websites, I don't know how accessible it is. But they do, because they're part of the agenda. And I know they've done a lot of work. I know that the county GIS department, they actually create a pretty cool map where they use the existing districts and then the proposed new districts, and they show where the lines shifted. That's a pretty neat map. You can get that from the county. If you just call the county and you contact the county PIO office, they'll be able to give that to you. And again, I think you could probably use that. My understanding is that's the school board is going to mimic that. And then the city, they've got a nice map of their proposed districts right now as well available.
So, and here's another question on census blocks. They'd like to know if the blocks can be broken up in while they or when they redraw district lines.
No, that's one of the things they say you cannot do, is you cannot break up a census block. So that becomes a little challenging. Like, if you think about the area around the airport, sometimes that gets a little tricky. And there's areas where, it's literally a point and click. It's kind of a fascinating, it can be addicting, and if you all go on that Florida Redistricting website, you can see it yourself. I mean, it's very user friendly. Just go there and it says draw your own map, and you can just drill down into Escambia County, even down further into the city of Pensacola, and start clicking around. You can see what these census blocks look like. So sometimes it becomes a challenge, because you'd like to take one little section, and once you click that section, it's connected to this big, huge census block. It makes it a little bit more difficult. But no, we don't have the ability to break up census blocks.
And I have a question, and forgive me because I'm a political neophyte, but when the commission or the people that get appointed to redraw the maps, who appoints them? So like the city, in the city, is it the mayor or the
Sure. So the only redistricting commission that we have here, or at the state level doesn't have redistricting commissions. They have the state legislature controls that process. They draw their own lines, and then they also draw the congressional lines. Locally, again, the school board is responsible for their lines. The county commissions responsible for their lines. The city is the only one that has a redistricting commission, and each of the 7 council members selected an appointee for that board. So basically they have a representative.
Okay.
Each council member has a representative.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I wondered about that.
Sure.
Are there any other questions, folks? If you've got a question, last chance to type it into chat very quickly, and I'll just hop on over to YouTube to make sure there are no questions there. Doesn't look like it, so we're clear on the YouTube end of it. So for us, to me, when I look at all the figures that you gave us, things look pretty clear and pretty straightforward, but I understand in other parts of the state, it doesn't work out that way. And that's because, as you explained, the legislators are the ones that control how those lines get redrawn. So
that's right. Well, again, there was a bit, and I would encourage you, if you haven't, sort of, I don't know how many of y'all on social media, but I'm kind of a Twitter junkie. I don't post a lot, but I read a lot. But the reaction was, they're actually surprise reaction from particularly the congressional districts of the maps that the Senate staff proposed today, that they were expecting, I think, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but the expectation was there was going to be more of an effort to make certain seats more safe for one party, the party that's in power, and apparently the people were surprised that they didn't. So
that is surprising.
Anyway. Yeah, but I mean, they got pretty clear standards, and again, there was the legislature, at least the Senate, got slapped pretty hard 10 years ago for what the judge ultimately decided they were not following the fair districts process, and so maybe they learned their lesson. I don't know, or maybe there's something else in the works. But the first. My again summation of what I saw, the reaction to the first set of maps was like, that's not too bad.
Oh, well, that's encouraging, very encouraging. So I don't see any more questions.
Right.
But
thank you all so much. It's always a joy to hopefully we can do this sometime again in person in the future. I always liked and again, it's going to be it's going to be one heck of an election year. We got a big governor's race. We got other state, and y'all, don't forget, 3 years ago we had 3 statewide recounts, 2 of which went to manual recount. Some people tend to forget that because of all the activity in 2020. Right. But we're the only state that's ever done that before in the history of the country, and we actually, not to toot our own horn, but I'll talk about my 66 colleagues who actually did pretty well. It's the first recount that the state has had after the 2000 election, and we had 3 of them at once. And so it was a challenge. And then of course we had the COVID election in 2020. So certainly appreciate all your efforts to help educate voters out there, and anticipate we'll certainly be working closely together in 2022.
Okay, and we certainly appreciate all your efforts to make the election process as smooth as possible. We really do. You do a great job.
Thank y'all. We'll see you soon.
Okay. All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for participating.